There are things that only happen in horror movies, and then there are things that happen in real life that make those movies look like comedies. Just ask Guilherme Fontanelle, a millionaire, a famous architect, owner of 3 companies, 2 mansions, and an ego too big to fit through the church door. On that stifling Thursday morning, Guilherme had made up his mind. He was going to demolish the mansion he inherited from his father. 40 rooms, 3 fireplaces, and a garden that looked straight out of Versailles. But it was all mouldy, old, infested with bad memories. His mother had died there. His father had been missing for over 20 years, and his heart, well, his heart had always been an abandoned lot. The sun had barely risen when the sound of sledgehammers echoed through the property. Walls crashed down, windows shattered like glass screams. Curiously, the only thing left standing was the old doghouse, a tiny wooden chalet forgotten at the back of the garden near the abandoned greenhouse. "Take that down too!" Guilherme shouted, pointing with his leather folder. That's when it happened. Right at that moment, a thin, almost childlike voice came from inside. "Help me!" The nearest worker's eyes widened. "What was that, boss?" "What do you mean?" "What? Get back to work." But Guilherme froze. His fingers trembled. His jaw locked. He knew that voice. It was impossible, but he knew it. Memory cracked like old wood splitting in half. The last time he had heard that "help me" was one night long ago, when his little sister Isadora disappeared in the garden. She was 6. She was never found. And now, 24 years later, that same voice was coming from the doghouse. The man's heart, one that had never cried for anyone, began to beat like it was trying to flee. He stepped forward, then back, as if the ground tried to swallow him, but guilt wouldn't let it. "Is someone there?" he shouted. Silence. The kind of silence that screams. The workers all stopped, one by one, staring at their boss like they were seeing a ghost in the flesh. And that's when things really started to unravel. Guilherme stood frozen, staring at the little house like it had grown legs and eyes. Just a crumbling piece of wood, a crooked roof, and a rusty old sign. Thor, the name of his childhood dog. The dog had died when he was still a kid, or at least that's what his father had said. The same week his sister vanished. Too much of a coincidence for his liking. "Stop everything!" he ordered, raising his hand like a referee in a championship final. The workers looked at each other, confused. It could have been a voice from a radio, or some kid pulling a prank. But their boss was pale as chalk, and it was clear something deeper was going on. "Mr. Fontanelle, are you sure? We can tear everything else down and leave the doghouse for last." "No, nobody touches that thing. Move." And he, in his tailored suit and imported shoes, walked toward the doghouse. Each step felt like a ton. The air grew colder. The garden trees, once gently swaying, now seemed to lean in slowly, as if they were listening. He crouched, placed his hand on the rusted doorknob, turned it. Nothing. "It's locked," he murmured, almost relieved. But as he began to stand up, it came again. "Guilherme!" The voice was clear, sharp, childlike, and worst of all, it called him by name. He staggered back 3 clumsy steps, tripped on a branch, and almost fell backward. No one else heard it, just him. Only he could hear that damn voice. He returned to the workers, trying to mask the panic. "Change of plans. You're all dismissed for today. We'll decide tomorrow." "But boss, are you all right? You look kind of pale." "Go home, Raimundo." The garden emptied in silence. The last truck pulled out slowly, dust rising at the iron gate, and there stood Guilherme, alone in the yard of a mansion haunted by memories, staring at a doghouse that whispered the name of a long-lost sister. He took a deep breath, pulled his phone from his pocket, and called the only living person who might have an answer. "Aunt Estella, do you still have the keys to Dad's house?" On the other end, silence. Then came the old, trembling, frightened voice. You heard Isadora too, didn't you?" Guilherme's world collapsed. His face drained of color, his throat dried up. What did the old woman mean by two? What did she know? And why had she never told? Guilherme's heart pounded like an out-of-sync samba drum. He pressed the phone harder to his ear, as if trying to squeeze more words out of Aunt Estella. That doesn't make sense. Or maybe it makes too much, and that's the problem. Oh, say that again, he demanded. Her voice came back shaky, soaked in old memories. 3 years ago, I went there. Before the house was sold, I needed to pick up some boxes from the basement, and as I passed through the garden, I swear on all that's holy, I heard a little girl crying and calling your name. I thought I was going crazy. Why didn't you ever tell anyone, Aunt? Who would believe me? Your mother was dead, your father had vanished, and you always froze up at the mention of Isadora. I was tired of sounding like a crazy old woman, thought it was just in my head, but now that you've heard it too. Her voice broke. Guilherme hung up without saying goodbye. His stomach turned. He took 2 shaky steps toward the stone bench near the flower bed and sat down. Looked up at the sky, but the sky looked back. Heavy clouds were gathering slowly, as if time itself had a memory. That's when he remembered the old diary of his mother, kept in a sealed wardrobe upstairs. He'd avoided going there. The smell of mothballs, moldy carpets, and that feeling of being watched, like time had stopped the very hour Isadora vanished. He entered the house. Each step made the floorboards creak like a scream for help. He climbed the stairs with the caution of someone handling dynamite. When he reached his mother's bedroom, the smell hit him like a childhood slap. Old perfume, baby powder, and a faint scent of burnt candle. Even with no candles lit, in the back of the closet, wrapped in a lace handkerchief, there it was. The diary, faded leather cover, 3 pressed flowers between the pages, and a dedication written in neat cursive, "To my little butterfly, who flew away too soon." Guilherme's hand trembled. He flipped through in a frenzy, desperate, angry, scared, until he stopped at a page that had been torn out and taped back in. There, written with letters smudged by tears, it read, September 19th, 1999. I heard it. I heard her voice again. In the garden. From the doghouse. How is this possible? Did he lie? Is she still... He dropped the diary on the floor. Again, the doghouse. Again, the voice. That was it. Something in that place wouldn't let the girl rest. Or worse, wouldn't let her escape. He ran downstairs. He no longer cared if he looked insane. The fear had shifted. The fear now was of having ignored for years what might have been saved. If Isadora was alive, if someone trapped her there, then he wasn't just a victim. He was complicit in the silence. Back in the garden, the wind had stopped. Nature was holding its breath. He knelt in front of the doghouse, and without thinking, he punched the wood hard. Isadora! No answer, just a sharp crack, as if something had broken inside. The dry crack that came from inside the doghouse was deeper than Guilherme expected. It wasn't just wood, it was heavier, denser, as if something long hidden had just awakened. He knelt, pressed his ear to the doghouse wall, and listened. Nothing. But in that suffocating silence, there was more than the absence of sound. There was presence, the kind that makes your neck hair stand on end without a touch, that squeezes your chest without a hug, the kind that lives where time stood still. Without wasting time, he ran to the old tool shed, grabbed a small sledgehammer, and returned to the garden with determined steps. The doghouse no longer looked fragile, it looked alive and scared, like a child cornered in the dark. If there's something in here, it's coming out now. He struck the side of the doghouse. The wood cracked, splintered, flew in shards. 2 more blows opened a hole big enough to peer inside. Sunlight tore into the darkness. Dust danced in the air. Cobwebs shifted. And then he saw it. At the back of the doghouse, under a pile of dead leaves, was something wrapped in a faded pink baby blanket with butterfly prints. The same blanket his sister used as a baby. The memory hit like a nail through the soul. He approached, heart racing. Pulled gently. Under the blanket were bones, small, delicate, clearly those of a child, and next to them, a one-eyed teddy bear, a name embroidered on its chest, Isa. Guilherme let out a muffled scream, collapsed to his knees. The world spun. Was that his sister? No, it couldn't be. The DNA would still have to confirm it, but his heart already knew. That wasn't just a body, it was a scream. A cry for help frozen in time. He stood up, staggering, holding the blanket as if carrying a sleeping baby, called the police. Then Aunt Estella. I found her. She was here. All this time, here. On the other end, the old aunt broke into sobs. My God, I knew something was wrong. Your father, he was never the same after that night. Guilherme froze. What do you mean, my father? He forbade me from telling you. Said the girl had run away, that you two had fought. But I knew he was lying. I knew. The call dropped. Guilherme looked up. The clouds had closed in completely. A distant thunder cut through the silence. The feeling now was different. The pain gave way to fury. Someone had killed Isadora. And worse, someone had hidden it. The past wasn't buried. It was locked in a doghouse. And the most terrifying thing now was that he had to face a possibility worse than loss. The truth. Some people don't go missing. They get hidden. And when you hide something too long, it becomes legend. That's what they did with Guilherme's father. Turned him into a comfortable mystery, a convenient disappearance, a ghost too useful for those who needed silence. But now the silence had been shattered. At the police station, tension was high. The bones were sent to forensics. The medical examiner confirmed they belonged to a female child between 6 and 7 years old. The blanket, the teddy bear, the dental structure, all matched Isadora Fontenelle. The DNA report was still pending, but Guilherme no longer needed science to tell him what his instinct already screamed. The police chief, a short, no-nonsense man, flipped through the old missing persons report. Yellowed paper, faded stamps, incomplete signatures. It says here your father gave a statement back then, claimed the girl went out to play in the garden and never came back. No signs of forced entry, no external leads. Guilherme took a deep breath. And no one found it odd that the dog disappeared the same day? The chief raised an eyebrow. Dog? Thor, the family dog, vanished the same day my sister did. There's no mention of that in the report. Guilherme closed his eyes. The anger clenched his jaw. What happened to my father? The chief cleared his throat, arms crossed. Your father, Mr. Anibal Fontenelle, disappeared 1.5 years after your sister. Left for a business trip and never returned. Declared missing. Case closed. Guilherme gave a crooked smile. Closed for who? He left the station carrying the weight of the world. Went straight to Aunt Estella's house. The old woman welcomed him in her nightgown, eyes puffy from crying and shame. The place reeked of medicine and regret. They sat in the living room. She clutched a rosary with trembling hands. You want to know what I know, don't you? He nodded silently. Your father and mother fought a lot. You know that. But that night, something changed. I was there. I heard screams, and I heard crying. A sharp, high-pitched cry. And then silence. But not just any silence, the heavy kind, like someone had unplugged the world. She paused, took a deep breath, continued. The next morning your father said Isadora had vanished, said she ran away. But there was dirt on his boots, and blood on his clothes. Guilherme clenched his fists. Why didn't you say anything before? Because he threatened to have me committed, said I was losing my mind, and I was afraid of losing you, too. His face hardened. Now, rage was his engine, and another memory clicked into place. His mother, she knew. Her diary made that clear, but she never confronted her husband. She died shortly after, heart attack, or maybe guilt. Guilherme stood. If her body was in the doghouse, then it was him, or someone helped him hide it, Aunt Estella added. At that moment, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from the police chief. Preliminary report ready, but we found something else. Something else? What more could there possibly be beyond what already hurt? In the land of the living, some pain never fades. In the world of the dead, some silence still bleeds. Guilherme walked into the station like a man heading to a funeral, one without a coffin, or worse, with one too open for the past to stay quiet. The chief was already waiting, wearing the look of someone who'd discovered what they never wanted to know. "We found more than bones." On the desk was a small sealed box labeled by the forensics team. Beside it, a preliminary report and a plastic evidence bag with two items, a baby tooth and a silver necklace with a star-shaped pendant. Guilherme recognized it instantly. That necklace was Isadora's. "I gave it to her on her birthday, the last one before." The tooth was wedged into the wood at the bottom of the doghouse, and the necklace was buried nearby with a piece of cloth and hair strands. The chief opened the folder carefully. Forensics found traces of human fiber caught in the planks. Someone trapped that child in there, alive, and left her to die. Guilherme lost his breath. It was worse than he imagined. His sister hadn't just been killed. She'd been forgotten, locked away, silenced. "What does this mean?" he whispered. "It means this wasn't an accident, not a disappearance. It was murder, aggravated." Silence fell, thick, suffocating. But the chief went on. "There's one more thing. One of the hair strands we found matches your father. We ran a quick comparison using an old personal brush stored as evidence in his disappearance case." Guilherme tightened his jaw. So he was there, at the very least, after the crime. "Or during," the chief replied dryly. Guilherme's head spun, the ground slid out from under him, but he didn't cry. Not yet. The tears were there, stuck behind his teeth, waiting to burst. He left the station without looking back, drove straight to the mansion, stopped in the garden, rested his hand on the broken doghouse, and looked at the hole in the ground. A grave, without a headstone, without prayer, but now with a story. He sat down on the grass. The wind moved through the trees, whispering names no one dared speak. In his hand, his sister's necklace, the metal still warm, as if it had a heartbeat, and there, for the first time in decades, Guilherme cried, not out of fear, nor sadness, but hate, because he knew this wasn't over. If his father had vanished, it was because someone had helped him, and now the name echoing in his head was a different one. Raimundo, the family gardener, still living in town, the same man who showed up the morning of the disappearance, with dirt under his nails. Guilherme didn't sleep that night, and it wasn't morning, it was a hunter's vigil. While the city dimmed its lights, he fed the fire of suspicion. He mentally revisited every face that surrounded the mansion back then, but only one name echoed like a hammer on rusted iron: Raimundo Bento, the family's gardener for over 30 years. Devout, quiet, always with a straw hat and dirty boots. Guilherme remembered being a kid, watching the old man trim the rose bushes while he and Isadora ran around the yard. He remembered the stern look Raimundo gave, especially when the little girl played near the greenhouse. Time passed, but Raimundo never left town. He lived in a small house at the edge of the Oliveiras neighborhood, near the railroad, and that's exactly where Guilherme went. No warning, no hesitation. The gate was ajar. A hoarse bark came from inside, an old skinny dog chained to the porch. Guilherme climbed the rotting wooden steps, knocked on the door. Silence. "Raimundo, it's me, Guilherme Fontenelle." More silence. "We need to talk." The door creaked open. On the other side, Raimundo looked older than the house itself, skin darkened by the sun, eyes small, heavy with memory. His hand trembled on the doorknob. "I knew you'd come." His voice came out like someone chewing broken glass. "You knew?" "The doghouse. When I saw on TV that they found, I knew it wouldn't take long." They went inside. The room smelled of oil and dust. On the wall, a painting of the Virgin Mary with a melted candle at its base. "You knew she was there?" Raimundo didn't answer. He shuffled to a rocking chair, sat slowly, and stared into nothing. "I was just a worker, sir. But I saw everything. Your father, he changed after your mother died." "My mother died 2 years after Isadora." "Yeah, but she was already dying on the inside." Guilherme moved closer, eyes fixed on the old man. "Tell me what happened that night." Raimundo closed his eyes. "She didn't want to go in. She cried, said her father had yelled at her. I heard it too, and I saw him dragging her through the garden, but I did nothing. I pretended I didn't see. I was scared. He was powerful, important, and sick. Sick how? The old man took a deep breath. I heard him tell the girl she had her mother's curse, that she had to be locked away so it wouldn't spread. That's madness. Madness, or the excuse of a coward. Guilherme lowered his head. His chest burned. Every word was a shovel of dirt thrown on a good memory. You helped hide her? I helped silence her. That's almost the same. Silence hung in the air, heavy. But why? Why didn't anyone do anything? Raimundo looked at him, eyes wet. Because in that house, truth was always buried under the flowers. And I was just another coward afraid of losing my job, but I kept something. He got up slowly, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a shoebox, handed it to Guilherme. It's all there. Letters, notes from your sister, and a tape. She recorded it before she disappeared. Guilherme's hand trembled. Inside those yellowed pages lay everything no one had dared to speak. But now he would hear it, from his sister's own voice. The tape recorder was old, the kind used in classrooms in the 90s. Black with stiff buttons and a worn-out cassette. Guilherme held it like it was sacred, or a bomb. In Raimundo's mouldy, regret-filled living room, he pressed play. A hiss filled the room. Then, the voice of a child. Hi, it's me, Isa. Guilherme's throat clenched. It was her voice, alive, pure, as if she were there, sitting on the rug with her teddy bear. If someone's hearing this, it means I managed to hide it, and you found it. I just wanted to say I'm scared. Scared of Daddy. He gets mad when I talk to Mommy. He says she died because of me, but she didn't die. She visits me at night. In my room, she hugs me and sings. Pause. A sniffle. Yesterday I saw him talking to himself in the garden. He said I have Mommy's eyes, that her eyes were from the devil, and that I can't go out anymore. He locked me in the greenhouse. I was cold and hungry. But Thor stayed with me. He doesn't leave me. More static, then a whisper. I hid the tape inside his house. If you found it, the truth came out. I love you, Gui. You were my hero. The tape ended. Guilherme couldn't breathe. His sister's words pierced his chest like nails, one by one. Raimundo just bowed his head. He said she was like the mother, that they both saw things, talked to what didn't exist. Guilherme stood, shaking. My father killed them both. Your mother died for real, from pain, from not being heard. But the girl, he killed with silence, and I helped. The old man sobbed, but Guilherme had no tears left. His face was dry, but his eyes burned. He left with the tape, the letters, and the certainty that justice wasn't a choice anymore. It was a duty, not for revenge, but for the voice of his sister, who never stopped trying to be heard, even from inside a doghouse the world forgot. The next day, Guilherme returned to the police station with the evidence. The police chief listened to everything. We have enough to reopen the case as a homicide, intentional, with aggravating factors of unlawful imprisonment and torture. But my father is either dead or missing. The chief folded his arms. Missing, but his CPF is still active. Someone moved funds from one of his old accounts 2 months ago through a shell company based in Minas Gerais. Guilherme raised an eyebrow. So he's alive, or someone's using his name. But now we have reason to pursue it. At that moment, the phone rang in the chief's office. He answered, listened in silence, then turned to Guilherme with a frozen expression. We got an anonymous tip. Someone claims they saw a man matching your father's description, entering a psychiatric asylum in Ouro Preto, using a false name and a silver bracelet on his left wrist. A bracelet? Guilherme asked, barely able to speak, with a small plate engraved, Guy and Isa forever. The world collapsed again. It was the same bracelet Guilherme had given his father when he was 7. Now the question wasn't whether his father was alive. It was, why was he hiding in a mental hospital? The asylum was called Refugio das Palmeiras. It sat atop a hill in Ouro Preto, surrounded by dense forest and morning fog, thick enough to hide anything. The kind of place where wealthy families bury their secrets under white coats and sealed records. Guilherme arrived with his father's file in hand and his sister's cassette in his pocket. He parked in front of the rusted gate. A nurse came out to meet him, overly friendly for a place that smelled of old medicine and sealed memories. "Mr. Guilherme, the patient you're looking for has been here since 2007. Came under a false name, Arnaldo Figueira, but his fingerprints matched your father's in the national database. We were shocked when you called. He hasn't had a single visitor in over 10 years. Is he lucid? Depends on what you call lucidity." They walked down a long corridor, lined with numbered doors and barred windows. Their footsteps echoed. Outside, the wind rattled the windows as if trying to warn them. They stopped at room 13. The nurse unlocked the door with a heavy keyring. He spends most of his time in silence, but he does speak, always the same phrases. Guilherme entered. There he was, sitting in a wheelchair, staring into nothing, white hair like ash, unkempt beard, thin, shrunken, as if he'd rotted from the inside out. On his wrist, 2 bracelets, one medical ID and the other silver. The little plate still gleamed, Gui and Isa forever. Guilherme stepped closer. His hands trembled. "Dad?" The old man turned his eyes, pupils dull, but something flickered deep inside, something that resisted time and drugs. "Guy, my boy!" The voice was weak, but recognizable. Guilherme knelt in front of him. "Why did you do it?" The old man took a long time to answer, as if searching for a drawer in his mind that didn't want to open. Isadora, she saw things, like her mother, whispered to the dark, smiled at shadows. I had to silence it. I had to protect you. By killing? I didn't kill. I just locked her away. She stopped screaming, and then I left." Guilherme closed his eyes. The world spun. "You let a child die. Your daughter, my sister." The old man was crying now, but it wasn't regret, it was fear. "They visited me at night. The mother and the girl spoke softly, said the garden remembered, that the doghouse still whispered." Guilherme stood. There was nothing left to say. He left the room, fists clenched and soul in ruins. In the hallway, the police chief was waiting. "We're taking him into custody. He'll be transferred to a forensic center. Even if deemed unfit to stand trial, this won't go unpunished." But Guilherme didn't answer. He looked at the rain starting to fall outside, heavy drops like tears from a sky that had seen too much. He knew justice was on its way, but he also knew that some things no law could fix. Because when blood betrays blood, there's no handcuff strong enough to bind what breaks inside. And one thing still remained: Isadora's burial, a symbolic funeral, to give her the farewell she never had. The sky seemed to understand. It drizzled cold, persistent tears, as if the world mourned on behalf of those dried out inside. Isadora Fontenelle's funeral had no crowd, no velvet ropes, just a small white coffin, too tiny for so much pain, beside an open grave, and a man in a grey suit with a shattered soul. Guilherme. He chose the garden of the old mansion, had it cleaned, restored, and built a memorial there. Not grand, but full of meaning. A butterfly statue, a plaque with his sister's name, and in the center of the flower bed, the doghouse restored. Not to hide the horror, but to remind that pain is also part of the story. Aunt Estella held an umbrella and a rosary. The chief came. Raimundo too, with his head lowered. Each carried their burden, but it was Guilherme who broke the silence. "For 24 years I believed a lie. Thought she'd run away, vanished, disappeared into the wind. But the truth is, she was silenced, locked up, forgotten." He placed the silver necklace on the coffin. "You didn't deserve this end, Isa. And I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'll spend the rest of my life making sure the world hears you, because now you have a voice." Shovels of earth began to cover the coffin. Guilherme didn't look away. Each scoop of dirt was a rewritten page, a scream finally heard. At the end, silence was broken by the sound of a music box. Aunt Estela had brought her old toy. The melody was soft, but soaked with tears. The funeral ended, but not the story, because that very same day, Guilherme made a decision. He would turn the mansion into a foundation for missing children with his sister's name on the gate, Isadora Foundation. The mansion's renovation took months. Guilherme sold off his shares in the companies, cut ties with his partners, and vanished from the high society that once worshipped him. He became the man who gave up millions to pay a debt to the past. The walls got fresh paint, the rooms, new purposes. The old basement became a shelter center, the library, an archive for unsolved cases. Everything now had a name, a face, a story. Nothing would ever be forgotten again. But not everyone was pleased. Sensationalist headlines began to circulate. Millionaire architect turns crime scene into shelter. From heir to homeless, Guilherme Fontenelle breaks from the clan. But he didn't flinch. The foundation had already saved 3 children, and each of them called him Uncle Guy. That hurt, but it hurt in a good way. Then one day a letter arrived. No return address. Old paper. Smelled of tobacco. She wasn't the only one. Your father saw evil in everyone. Look at the back of the greenhouse, where not even roots dared grow. Guilherme clenched his teeth. More secrets? He descended into the garden, opened the trapdoor of the old greenhouse. Below, a stone basement, an area he'd never had the courage to explore. At the far end, he found the remnants of toys, and a wooden box with scratch marks on it. The box was empty, but there was dried blood on the lid, and a torn photo inside. 4 children. One of them didn't belong to the family, not a neighbor, not someone familiar. And so the question returned with crushing force. How many more? The investigation reignited. Guilherme handed the photo to the chief, along with Isadora's tape, the anonymous letter, and everything else uncovered. The media began to suspect the benevolent architect was now at the center of something much bigger, a case that smelled like a network of silence, with powerful names behind it. Aunt Estela started receiving threats. Raimundo disappeared, and someone tried to burn down the foundation. It was personal and deep. One night, Guilherme was woken by a scream in the garden. One of the children, an 8-year-old girl, was in shock, pointing toward the flower bed. There was a lady with black hair. She told me, "Don't let him come back." Fear crept into the house. But Guilherme didn't retreat. He went to the archive, dug into his father's records, and found that Aníbal Fontenelle had once been accused, in secret, of abuse. Back in 1983, the case was dismissed, vanished like everything that threatened the powerful. The girl in the photo was the daughter of a former housemaid, still missing to this day. Another one. The past wasn't just screaming, it was pounding on the door, and this time Guilherme was going to open it. The mansion began to change, not in structure, in soul. Doors slammed by themselves, lights flickered, children cried without cause. But Guilherme knew it wasn't haunting, it was memory. Memory has a smell, a sound, a presence, and in that house memory still hurt. He decided to call a press conference. There in the garden before the cameras, he told everything, about his father, about his sister, about the children. And at the end, he said, "If this house is destroyed, they'll erase the pain it holds. But if it stays standing, every wall will remember the ones who were silenced." The next day, another envelope arrived. Inside, the names of 3 more missing children. And at the bottom, a signature, R. Raimundo was still alive, and he knew more than he'd ever revealed. Raimundo was found in a nearby town, sick, full of remorse. Before he died, he wrote a letter to Guilherme. "It wasn't just your father. Others used to come visit, people paid to see. I saw it but never spoke. There were politicians, judges, people you'd shake hands with at Mass. I was just the gardener, but I buried more than one secret in that soil." The letter was added to the investigation. Guilherme sat before the foundation's fireplace, the children asleep upstairs. The fire crackled, memories burned. and he understood. His sister's story was just the tip. But even if he never uncovered all the names, he had already started to change the ending. Life has equations that never balance. Sometimes the pain lasts longer than it should, and justice arrives late, limping, cane in hand, but it arrives. And when it does, even if it doesn't bring back what was lost, it shines a light on what stayed in the dark for too long. The Isadora Foundation turned 5. The garden of the old mansion, the same one where the doghouse once held a forgotten girl's scream, now bloomed like never before. A lavender corridor led to the memorial, where hundreds of names were engraved in stone. Some children found, others still faceless, but all remembered. Guilherme, now grey-haired and with a serene step, walked among the trees with light feet. He was no longer the man consumed by guilt. He was someone else, someone who hadn't forgotten the pain, but had chosen to walk with it without letting it consume him. He sat on the stone bench facing the restored doghouse. Children played nearby, laughter, voices, life. From his pocket, he took the old tape recorder, pressed play one last time. His sister's voice returned, sweet and brave. "If you found this tape, it's because you listened. I love you, Guy. You were my hero." He closed his eyes, smiled with his soul. The breeze rustled through the leaves like a gentle caress. "I wasn't your hero, Issa. You were mine." There, sitting in the same spot where it all began, he wrote in his notebook, "This house was once a prison, a grave. Today it's a shelter. It once silenced. Now it listens. What pain destroyed, memory rebuilt. And if one day they erase my name, may they never erase the courage of a little girl who, even trapped in a doghouse, never stopped speaking." And as he closed the notebook, a little girl with braids ran up to him, breaking the silence. "Uncle Guy, come see the picture I drew." He stood, slowly but whole, took the girl's hand and walked with her to the foundation's porch. On the wall, the drawing, a little house, a garden, and 2 figures holding hands, a big boy and a girl in a pink dress with butterfly wings. Guilherme smiled. The past couldn't be changed, but the future could. And on that patch of earth, where once no one heard a scream, now all you could hear was the sound of life. Some people are born invisible, but were never meant to live erased. So, what did you think of that story? Leave a comment below, drop a like to support the channel, and subscribe so you don't miss the next good story. Until next time, from your Vovo Rico.